Okay, welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I'm delighted to have my friend Jeff here presenting on a topic which is particularly relevant today about the art of productive disagreement. So let me hand it over to Jeff. Jeff, take it away.
Hi, Shrikant. Hi, everyone. Thanks for spending this time with us this afternoon. I want to remark just about the title. There are some of you on the phone that have worked with me over the past couple of years, and my wife remarked that the art of productive disagreement with Jeff Nugent is something that she would actually like to see, because you know, working out productive disagreement with me personally might be interesting, at least to a couple people, certainly her. So it is true in a way, as I reflected on it, that this is actually, you know, by definition, the art of productive disagreement with me, because it's what I've learned, and it's what I believe, and what I believe my experience has taught me. So in a sense, it's a perfectly correct title, and the art of productive disagreement for you, it might have some things to do with you personally. Shrikant, did you want to offer anything about that?
That was hilarious. I didn't realize that, but yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you.
So I have a quick question for each of you that I'd like to start off with. I'm very fond of questions. I think that most of what we think and feel and do is our response to questions that we choose to pose. So here are my two questions for the start, and I'd like you to, if you're willing, to share your answers very quickly to them, just in one word or two answers to each of them. The first one is, when you see serious disagreements starting to arise about subjects that are important to people, question number one is, what do you often feel? So just type your one sentence answers. When you see serious disagreements are beginning to unfold here, so what do you feel? So Shrikant, if you would just read me some of those one sentence answers.
Yes. Okay, they're coming fast and furious.
Don't need the names, just the words is fine.
Yes. Okay, give me a second. This is too fast. Okay. All right. I feel initially uncomfortable, anxiety, excited, blood pressure rising, disappointment, intrigue, restless, tension, excited, fear, concern. They had not agreed to a higher level of objectives yet. Excited. Let me see. Opportunity, curious. Yes.
Great. So, you know, so I'll tell you what I often feel. You know, I don't know who said disappointed. I actually often feel disappointed too. Like, oh darn, you know, does this really have to happen? You know, especially if I can see that it's a pretty serious disagreement. Second is, whatever you often feel. Again, you know, one or two words. What do you often do?
Okay, so you can go ahead and type your answer. What do you do?
Yeah.
Listen. Go ahead. Get agreement on goals. Watch. Find my side. Try to smooth things over or say nothing. Ask, why do you hold that opinion? Change the topic or walk away. Listen and prepare to take a side or neutralize. Attempt to offer their common ground. Get involved, see both points of view. Despise having to deal with this.
Yeah.
Look at each person's premise.
Terrific. So, I can tell you that I have grown, and really probably my primary motivation for doing this is whomever wrote, I despise having to deal with this. I can really relate to that, and I appreciate it. So, but you know, here's the you know, the opportunity and the challenge. So, you know, serious disagreement is unavoidable. It's just, you know, to expect anything other than that to be happening on a regular basis is to make oneself in the long run, very unhappy, very disappointed, because you can't escape it. And the more you engage with people about things that are important to them, the more disagreement there's going to be. And the it not only does it happen every day between individuals, um, it happens every day between and within different groups. So it happens across politics and gender and race and age and wealth and religion and countries. And it happens on issues that really are incredibly significant, like racial inequality, climate change, pandemic policies, policing. Um, and then the age old question, in our house, who's going to cook dinner tonight and what are they going to make, or should we just do takeout? So the from the large and consequential to the small and consequential, these subjects are absolutely unavoidable. And uh, and not only are they there in one-on-one relationships, you might be interested to know this. It's the number of relationships in any group that also equals the number of possible disagreements. So the formula is the number of people in the group times that number minus one. So for example, if you have two people, two times one is two. There's just two relationships. But look at this. If you go to three people in a group, three times two is six. So you just went from two possible disagreements to six. You go to four, you just went to 12. You go to five people in a group, it's 20 relationships. It, you know, and so that's the reason why things take longer when you add more people to a team, and why the perspectives get exponentially richer, but why the groups become harder, more of a challenge to actually manage. So this session is just going to be a little survey course on the subject of productive disagreement. It will not be comprehensive. Even by the two-day course that I do on this, there are major things left out here. It will not be perfect because it's constantly evolving. I'm constantly improving it, and we'll look forward to gaining your feedback about it. But I want to start with one thing that I think is absolutely key to this subject, and it's a story. This story comes from uh, Andy Goodman, who is really the best storytelling consultant and trainer and coach I have ever seen. You can find him at the Goodman Center. He's based in Los Angeles. So it goes like this. The editor of a parenting magazine was always on the lookout for parents doing great things with their children so he could write about them in his monthly column. One day, when he was entering the supermarket, he was followed by a young mother, face to face with her daughter strapped into that little seat in the shopping cart. The child was absolutely screaming, and as the mother walked past, he heard her say, "It's going to be okay, Jennifer. We're just going to get some milk, so get some eggs, get some bread, check out at the cashier, get in our car, and drive back home." He was deeply impressed by the mother's compassion for her distressed daughter and wondered how long she could keep up with her kind and caring words to her child. As she walked to the back of the store, her daughter cried and shrieked even louder, as only toddlers can do, and could be heard by everyone throughout the entire store. He decided to see if he could somehow walk past them to see how the mother was doing, and when they entered an aisle, he turned to walk into it himself. As they passed, he heard the mother say, "It's going to be okay, Jennifer. We got the milk. We'll get the bread. We'll get some eggs, check out at the cashier, get in the car, and drive back home." He was amazed that this young mother was able to continue gently consoling her daughter, and he hoped to speak with her briefly about how wonderful she was doing so he could use her as a great example in the magazine. He figured if he went to the checkout area, he might be able to talk with her for a minute, and she arrived there shortly. He gently asked her, "Would it be okay if I spoke with you for just a second?" And she nodded and said, "Okay." He said, "I'm the editor of a parenting magazine, and I'm always looking for examples of parents doing wonderful things for their kids. I couldn't help noticing how kind and caring you're being, trying to console young Jennifer here. The mother looked up and said, "Oh no, I'm Jennifer." So the question I have for you is, very quickly, if you have one, what might be the moral to this story? And just throw it into the chat if you have one that fits. Any possible morals there, Shrikant?
Self-control. You need to take care of your own needs first before helping others. A disagreement is about how you handle your side,
Mm,
parent yourself. Perception could be misleading. Take care of your own emotions first. You need to maintain your control to control the situation.
mm,
Jennifer had to both soothe herself before she could help her daughter.
right. So those are all great. And one that I would offer is that the conversations we have with ourselves, in fact, the conversations we're always constantly and continuously happening with ourselves, will be the most important conversations we have all day. We're having conversations with each other. We're aware of that. We're often less aware of the conversations that we're having with ourselves. But in some ways, the conversations with ourselves are influencing the conversations that we're having with each other in ways that we may or may not be adequately aware. And sometimes, if we would not only listen to ourselves, but maybe talk to ourselves a little more, might help us through some more difficult situations. So, one of the sort of interesting things about the subject of productive disagreements is that sometimes I find that just bringing up the topic, saying the words productive disagreement can touch a nerve with people. They can get pissed off just suggesting that there's such a thing as a productive disagreement. And I had this happen in a funny way with some folks in the last week. Um, they sometimes feel fear or anger just hearing it. Um, and I've had some great conversations with people who have shared with each other what they were feeling and thinking, um, and as a way of beginning to explore what might lead to not only a productive disagreement, but some wonderful ways of proceeding. Um, we're not going to do that right now, but just know that sometimes sharing what it is you're thinking and feeling with another person and having them do the same thing is a wonderful way to get off of a conversation that seems to be circular, where people are kind of talking past each other, that if they'll just stop for a second and say, okay, what am I, let me share with you what I'm saying to me, and let the other person say what they're saying to me. Sometimes that can be a really helpful thing. My wife is a psychotherapist, and she uses that in marriage counseling sometimes, and says that it can really help sometimes. So um, I'm going to model that for you. So what I'm feeling after my experience of just bringing it up with people lately and having them feel fear and anger, I'm going to share with you what I'm feeling right now. So I'm feeling two things. I'm a little bit anxious because I don't know what you're feeling and thinking. And, I'm just sort of acknowledging that to myself, but I'm also a lot excited because I think I have a few things. I'm confident that I have some things to share about this that might be really helpful to you. And I think this is an incredibly important subject, both in our world the way it is today, but really all the time. So that said, here we go. The goal of productive disagreement um, is to produce the wisest and most mutually beneficial results by a process or processes that generate the highest level of what I call smart trust. Smart trust comes out of a book by Stephen M. Covey, the son of Stephen Covey. Um, and that book is called The Speed of Trust. Um, and he says that, elaborating on it a bit, but he says that smart trust is characterized by one, a belief that others will act honorably, that they'll do the right thing. especially when nobody's watching, that they are competent, they have the knowledge, skills, and experience to do whatever we need them to do, that they have the capacity to do it, the time, uh, the uh, the focus, the health, they got enough sleep last night, they have the capacity. And last, that there will be integrity, kind of alignment between their words and their actions. We can count on them to do what they say. That when you add up those things, what you wind up with is a high level of smart trust, and that that this the idea of smart trust is beyond just, do you think that somebody is a good person and do you trust them to be honorable? That it actually goes a little farther than that when we're really engaged in some significant endeavors, problem solving around complex and consequential issues ourselves. Um, so, like for example, as he says there, I might, you know, uh, I might trust my wife completely to do the right thing, but I wouldn't trust her to have brain surgery on me because my wife is not good at brain surgery. And so I need somebody that I can exercise smart trust with to do that. So um, next, Scott Peck in The Road, who wrote the Road Less Traveled, this amazing book on emotional maturity and the challenge and really exhortation of personal responsibility, also wrote a book called, much less popular, A Different Drum: Community Making and Peace. And he did it after working with about 100 communities throughout the United States over a period of years. And in it, he presents the 4 stages of community. Now, I actually think there's 5, so I'm going to add one to it when we get there. But the first stage is what he calls pseudo-harmony. Now, in pseudo-harmony, this is where people are either put together because they're working together, or maybe they're attracted to each other, and they might even be infatuated, and they're getting along, and they sort of ignore their disagreements or they try to minimize them. But whether or not, whether they like the person or not, they're trying to get along. Um, the second stage, he said, of community building is chaos. And I thought that was sort of, I thought, in a way, I thought that was kind of overdoing it a bit. But given my experience over the last decade, I don't think he was overdoing it a bit. I think he was right on target. And that's where there's serious disagreement about something that is important to the people involved. There's something that one or more people want that they don't think they're getting, and they believe that the other people can give it to them or should, or they want to get it from them. Whether that's agreement on some issue, or whether it's even a perception of what's going on, or maybe a decision that needs to be made, or something that needs to be given, some kind of transaction. And so that disagreement, it's a little bit, you know, when people are dating and they have their first major argument, that's a little bit what it's like, and then you got to say, okay, well, it's all been wonderful, and now we've had this argument, or we're having this argument. Where are we going to go with this? And the next stage, the third stage that he says that he calls is emptiness, which is kind of an interesting name as well. And in essence, the emptiness stage is characterized by this: can we resolve this disagreement in a way that is a kind of mutually beneficial, acceptable to both of us? The outcome is good enough, and maybe great, but at least good enough, to both of us or all of us. And can we do it in a way that increases our cohesiveness? It builds greater smart trust. And there are absolutely no guarantees that folks in any team or any relationship actually can achieve that. That, it's really up to all the players involved. And so They might be able to move forward together, or maybe not. It all hangs in the balance. And really the focus here, when you bring it all down to everything, is on two things. It's on relationships and results. That's really and if you put this into a little 2x2 box with results on the vertical axis and relationships on the horizontal axis, you know, the bottom left would be low results, low relationships. You know, we're fighting and we're not getting what we want. That's not a good sign. You know, the top left box would be high results, but bad relationships. So you might get what you want, but the relationship is over. Um, and, you know, far right, you know, high relationship, you're getting along, it works out, but the result is not so good, you know, and really, you know, nobody really likes it. That's not really productive disagreement either. Productive disagreement is the top right box, where the result seems wise, seems adequately correct and right and worthy of investment and experimentation and trying it out, you know, application, and where the process used to get there, whatever we did that helped us come to that joint decision is such that we say, okay, you know, I'm still here. I'm still in. We're still connected. We're still in this together, and we can move forward together. Um, I'll share with you stages 4 and 5 later when we get there. In terms of, you know, you know, the, the sort of different types of, if you wanted to say, you know, disagreements really in terms of whether they're productive, simply you might say, you know, there's destructive, there's unproductive, and there might be, and then there's productive, uh, you know, disagreements. And obviously destructive are characterized by attack, by abuse, by personal attack, by really, you know, terrible arguing with false equivalencies and all straw man and not listening to each other and all those kinds of things. That tends to destroy a relationship. Um, Unproductive is, I would say, where we're just kind of avoiding it. You know, we're not really talking about it. And so we end up going in circles because nobody's really saying exactly what they mean. Or maybe we're saying it, but we're just not listening. We're listening only to reply. We're not listening to understand. So we never really do understand. We keep stating our opinion or our, you know, wish, and nobody's listening, and it doesn't go anywhere till we get sick of it and we quit. Productive is where we listen to each other. We think together. We're creative. We come up with ideas that maybe neither of us had at first. We collaborate. We co-create, and in a very real sense, what we're doing here, and this comes out of the book by Judith Glaser called um, Conversational Intelligence. It's a fantastic book if you've never seen it. It's an amazing book. I think it might even be the best book on this subject. Is where there's me and there's you, and we're trying to get to we. We're trying to get to we're in this together, and we're moving forward together. And we're going to honor each other and respect each other. And we're going to think and be as creative and as critical of whatever ideas come up. And we're good with that because we're committed to coming up with ideas that are not only the best ideas, but ideas that we can implement and all gain from. So before I go into all that, I think Shrikant, maybe it would be good to take a minute and take a few questions, observations, whatever you think.
Absolutely. So, folks, we've got 4 rules as always. Number 1, in order to ask a question, go ahead and type an exclamation mark in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Number 2, keep on topic. We're talking about productive disagreement. Number 3, be brief. And number 4, feel free to disagree with anybody on anything and do so courteously. First up is Tom. Tom, go ahead. Just a second. I need to enable this. Give me a second. Yes, Tom, go ahead.
Okay. Jeff, thank you very much. I have a bee in my bonnet, which is that disagreements are often about the means to an end, but the parties haven't agreed on the ends.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. And we're as well as you'll be glad to know that we're going to focus on stakeholders in a minute. And so, yes, I completely agree with you about that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Robin, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if you've ever thought of this in terms of like risk. Like in some cases with me, I just think, well, this person probably disagrees with what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it. And that's sort of a risk that I'm taking with that relationship. Or is that sort of outside of your approach?
No, I think it's always there. You know, I think it has to be considered as part of the package. And I think that the challenge, which with regard to things that feel risky, is to bring them up in a way that move us closer to inspiring and inviting the increase of what I called smart trust there. In other words, it's a good thing to be honest, but honesty can be a weapon or it can help, you know? And so given that my orientation here is to give this a shot to see if it's possible for us to move forward together, what I'm recommending is that we each figure out the best ways that we have in a very affirming and appreciative and responsive way, can be completely honest and yet help to move the conversation forward so we can make progress as opposed to potentially just stopping it right there.
Next up is Joe.
I'm just building on the idea of trust. You know, I'm used to looking at a framework with the idea of, you know, the person has to be logical, they have to be empathetic, and they have to be authentic. You know, that this is somewhat of a model like that we kind of have. What is the difference between that and smart trust? Was you had integrity, and what were the other components to it? Because I see a lot of similarities in these frameworks. But I just want to know, because the idea that somebody needs to be, you know, not only in the empathetic, they have to actually care about the result more than they care about the argument itself. So that's a really important part of this equation as well.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah. So, you know, I'm extending this to not just sort of characteristics of the person with regard to the relationship. I'm focusing this on a combined focus on both relationship and results. And so given that I'm after both of those, you know, and that people on a team or, you know, in a group, in a company or an organization are playing roles that are really important, you know. So for me to trust the CFO to be to do what I need them to do as a CFO, I have to believe that not only are they honorable and have integrity and all those things, but that they have the skills and the experience to be a great CFO. And that's part of sort of extending this idea to not only the relationship, the interpersonal relationship, but also something we're trying to achieve together.
Next up is Ping, followed by Jairo. Ping, go ahead.
Okay, I want to say that in order to have such a productive conversation with your opponent, I would imagine you have to have a really good emotional control, and you have to come from a peaceful and calm place. But in reality, it is extremely difficult because it depends on your prior exposure, the repetition and the duration of the prior exposure to this kind of difficult conversations. And I also wanted to mention, in real life, I observed some of our administrators are terrific leaders, and they really manage difficult conflicts at the workplace very, very well. But if you dig a little bit deeper, so you can say they achieved a good result and build relationships. But if you dig deeper in their private life, it was a hot mess. They either have a huge health problems themselves with a cancer, all kinds of serious health issues, or they have a terrible relationship at home. So how would you explain that? So my guess is they did not really digest or dissolve the issue internally. They just mask it on the surface. And so this negative energy somehow was transferred internally. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I think that there are different roles that we have and different strengths to play those roles, and some that we're more confident about and more skilled about, some that we're less confident about and less skilled about. The role of parent is a different role than a professional role, or the role of adult son or daughter, with older parents, or that's a different role. So these are really different situations, and so the internal, the ability to have a certain level of internal equilibrium that gives you the ability to think clearly and not just react, which we're going to get into in a moment here, and be able to respond in a way that is instead more thoughtful. That'll change depending on which situation you're in and which one is hooking you. So this idea of getting hooked, all right, it's a wonderful, wonderful metaphor. You've got this fish that's swimming around, and life is good. And they see other fish, and they see a lot of things down there, and they eat whatever they eat. And all of a sudden, here's this shiny thing, and they bite into it. Oh, good Lord. It hurts like crazy, and they're just being jerked around, and this is not going to end well, and they can't get free. So the idea of getting hooked by something, by being, in an emotional reaction, is just horrible. I love that. And what somebody said to me, so first of all, that's an incentive to not take the bait, not get hooked. And then somebody said, well, one of the differences between human beings and fish is that we have hands. We could actually take the hook out. And so the moral to that story was, don't be a fish. And if and don't get hooked. And if you do get hooked, get unhooked. And so that, there you go. It's a little metaphor, but and also, Ping, I think that it definitely speaks to the magnitude of the challenge of this endeavor.
Thank you. Next up is Jairo, followed by Jyoti, and then we will move to the next part of the presentation. Jairo, go ahead.
So how to engage skillfully and productively with a camp that is of the opposite side of your political spectrum, where you consider them to be cult followers and they consider you to be cult followers. And in Facebook in particular, how to start a post, or a post is already there and you want to jump in there and introduce yourself and say, I disagree in this point and here's why. How would you do that?
So Jairo, that's an incredible setup to exactly what we're going to do next. So I'm going to defer, with your permission, I'm going to defer my answer about 3 minutes because I'm about to do exactly that. Okay?
Excellent. Next up is going to be Jyoti.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to say is redundant. I think Ping made a beautiful point, so did Joseph. The question is, you have to make it like an honest, really honest effort to win the other party. They should get some kind of a feeling that you are a little bit on their side rather than starting with negativity and going in the opposite direction. Then you lost it. Then there's no way you can proceed further. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're being very kind, Jyoti. I think that actually it's the extreme of what you said that's right. you need to convince people that you're really on their side, that you get what they are thinking, maybe even better than they do. And that you can share that with them in a way that communicates to them that you really understand. You can really appreciate what they're feeling, what they're thinking, why they're thinking it, even to refer to Tom's point here, why they think something is the most important goal. And you might even disagree on what the goal is significantly, much less how to get there, which is hard enough in itself. So the level and list of things about which we can have conflict at the feeling level, as well as the thinking level, much less the decision level, is so great that taking the time to really find out what somebody is thinking so that you can appreciate it. And maybe if you're really skillful, you can say it back to them in a way that they can't imagine, maybe even saying it as well themselves. Then you have a chance of moving forward on some really tough issues.
And that was excellent, Jeff. So shall we go ahead and go to the next one?
Great. Thanks, everyone. Those were terrific. And thanks for Jairo and Jyoti for setting me up for this next point here. So we're going to return to this idea of relationship and results that I talked with Joe there regarding the nature of smart trust. And this point that is there is in the Conversational Intelligence book there, they formed something called the We Institute, where interestingly enough, in their survey, they surveyed 4,000 leaders of organizations and companies around the world. And what they found that people were weakest, the areas that they were weakest in were in having difficult conversations. And they were also weakest in basically being able to skillfully say, I wonder if, to be able to create creatively and appreciatively, ask questions that would generate people thinking and seeing things from different perspectives. So the first thing I want to say about that is that that in the I'm sure, I know you all are familiar with the book Conversational Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. If you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend it. I think it's a great book. In there, he does a little 2x2 box, if you will, where he talks about on one axis the extent to which we are aware of ourselves and whatever we're thinking, whatever we're feeling, that we're able to listen to the things that we're saying to ourselves that are generating whatever we're feeling and whatever we're arguing for. So not just focusing on whatever we're saying to the other person, but what are we saying to us? And then on the other axis is social awareness, that I'm a solitary being and there's a conversation I'm having with me, and I'm a social being and there's a conversation that I'm having with somebody else. And to what extent am I aware of whatever they're kind of feeling and thinking that might even to some extent be behind whatever they're arguing with me? And that gets to your point, Jyoti, as well, that if I'm able to actually tune in to what might be going on with that person that's even behind whatever it is that they're saying, however strongly, however clumsily, if I can somehow intuit and from my experience have a correct sense of whatever's going on with them, that's a big help. And then second, to what extent, and they use the word regulate, I know what they mean by that, but I like to think of it as sort of influence and manage. To what extent am I able to regulate or influence or manage whatever it is that I'm going to do as a result? Can I do the right thing in this situation that's going to, as I was saying to Robin, that's going to get us further down the road of being able to not only at a feeling level feel appreciated and respected by the other person, but also do this in a way that where I'm listening to them and giving that whatever they're saying back to them in such a way that they feel that I get it. And even if we're disagreeing, we're able to make progress as opposed to be engaged in some stupid circular, discussion. And then to what extent am I able to not only regulate what I do, but then really um, help to influence, help to support, help to invite, help to open up possibilities for how the other person could actually engage that will help us move forward together. So this awareness, as well as self-awareness and awareness of the other, as well as self-regulation and my ability to relate to the other, that can keep us moving forward together. And I'm going to get to some of those things that you can do that we all need to get better and better at doing in a moment. But I want to offer just a little picture here of my sense of why do we do what we do? Why we do what we do? And the first aspect of it is that the the amygdala in our brain has stored all the experiences that we've had in this lifetime. And it is impossible for us to not project past experiences onto whatever's going on right now. We just can't do it. We're not capable of just seeing the situation as it actually is in the moment. We're always bringing some level of learning or prejudice, fear or anger, whatever, based on whatever we learned or might be left over from feelings we had from prior situations. So just to become aware that that's always going on. And then second, that each of us sees situations from a particular vantage point, from our lives and how our lives are right now. We might have heard the phrase sometimes that, where we stand on some issue is often a function of where we sit. That it's impossible to not understand that the perspective that we have, what we say, is directly related to our vantage point. In other words, if you're on one side of a mountain and I'm on the other side of a mountain, and there's somebody on top of a mountain who spent the night there, and they're getting ready to drive around this mountain, and there's a circular road going down that mountain, and they just want to give us a call to find out whether or not the mountain, the road got washed out, right? And they call me and I say, no, the road looks great. It's perfect. No problems whatsoever. My perspective is correct. If they called somebody else who's on the other side of the mountain, looked up and said, no, if you're going to do this at all, you're going to have to do it very slowly. There's rocks in the road and it looks like part of this is washed out, they would also be correct. So from our different vantage points, we have potentially not, but I mean potentially correct perspectives. What we might not have are correct perceptions. In other words, when we ask ourselves, well, okay, I see that's happening. Why is that happening? We may or may not be correct in our explanation of why something is happening, why something's happening in the economy, why something's happening in the climate, why something's happening in government, why something happening, as Ping said, in our own families. We may not have a very correct answer to the question of why what we see is happening. And that's often where the conflict gets deeper. When we see a bunch of things happen, perspectives, and we answer that question why enough times, we ultimately form conclusions, which we sometimes call opinions, as in they say, like, opinions are like noses, everybody's got one. That we form opinions based upon our collective perceptions, and those opinions lead us to decide what we're going to do, or to try and get other people to do them with us or as well. We should be skeptical about our opinions and our perceptions, and skeptical about the opinions and the perceptions of others, because to some extent we're guessing. Quite often we don't have enough information to really know for sure. And so that what that takes us to then is this idea of conversational intelligence. And this is before we even get to Tom's point about deciding completely exactly what it is that we're trying to achieve. If we can't do it in a way that has a high level of conversational intelligence, it doesn't matter anyway, because it's not going to work. Um, we're going to argue and it's just going to be pointless. Um, and so in conversational intelligence, there are a number of different things that you bring to this party that can ensure that the end result is a productive disagreement. One is make sure you just have very high on your list. It's always there. It's always one of the first things you do. Appreciating whatever it is that the other person's saying. Just appreciate it. Just show respect for it in some way, even if it's just to, I can see where you're coming from given this and this and this. You may completely disagree with it, but appreciate it and appreciate them for sharing it with you. Second, there's the ability to engage in what we call active listening. Some call it reflective listening. Some call it generous listening. But it's simply this. When somebody tells you something that's really important to them, and then they stop, and even if they've followed the rules, Sri Kant's rules here, and they've kept it brief, you might ask them, so tell me more. Tell me more about that. And, I would say, if you remember nothing else from what I'm offering here this afternoon, remember this line, could you tell me more? And then remember, second, whatever they say, that the next thing for you to say is not a reply. The next thing for you to say is, what else can you tell me more about that? What else can you tell me about that? There's a couple of things that are going on there. Number one, you're going to find out a lot more about what this person really thinks, why they think it, what things are leading to them feeling and thinking whatever it is they're feeling and thinking. And you're buying yourself a little bit of time to consider it before you give in to whatever your reaction is or act or respond. So you're buying yourself some time to consider it, and you're accepting whatever your emotional reaction is to it, and you're thinking about how you can respond. So you're pausing a little bit here. Second, you're actually getting the what you're going to need to then be able to say to them, okay, so if I understand correctly what you're saying here, da 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 da, is that right? So the person now feels like you cared enough to find out what they thought. You cared enough to actually understand it and maybe even check out whether or not you're getting it right. They feel some measure, if you do it in a positive way, they feel appreciated, they feel respected, they feel like you've checked out, are you getting it right? If you didn't get it right, they have the chance to fill in the blank and correct it. You're building up a really big reservoir here, because even if you're going to say some very hard things later, you're actually tilling the soil and planting some seeds in this garden before you go there. Next is, and then after you've done that, and then the response of one of empathy and compassion. Well, you know what? If that was going on with me and I thought that was there, I would feel that way too. So kind of a validation, or I can see why you feel that way. Empathy, compassion, and so if you go down the road of appreciation, appreciative inquiry, showing respect, reflecting, getting it right, expressing a little bit of validation, a little bit of empathy, whatever you have to say next, there's going to be much more openness to it than would have ever been there before. And guess what? You just had a little bit of time to think about it on the side rather than having to come up with an answer right away. So if you remember nothing else, remember that. Next is, Brene Brown is really big here on authentic vulnerability, you know, of being able to say, it takes a lot of confidence to be authentically vulnerable, to be able to say, you know what, I'm not really sure what the answer to that is. You know what, I don't really know exactly what to do with that. You know, I think I need to find out more about that. I wish I knew more. I'm not really sure what the right thing to do is. Um, I mean, if you know it, okay, but you might not, given the complexity of some of the things that are going on today. Next, rather than passive or aggressive kind of communication, one of the things that I've seen that's really weak in a lot of us is our ability to be assertive, to be able to say, I feel, I think, and why, I want, and why, I like this, and why, I don't like that, and why, I'm hoping for this, and why. The ability to make clear I statements as opposed to aggressive statements are like, you are this, you're doing this, you're doing that, whatever, you know, judgmental, confronting, you know, I honestly feel you're doing that. And if you would just change, you know, um, uh, you know, they're really basically saying, what the hell is wrong with you? Why can't you be more like me? And when you get right down to it, those are often the things we're saying. What the heck is wrong with you? And why can't you be more like me? Um, and then the passive side, you know, of not really saying clearly and assertively what it is that we think, that we want, and why. Um, Last, just sort of, you know, persevering, you know, being determined, you know, don't give up. This is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, and staying curious so that you can be resilient. And so all of those things will help this next thing that I'm going to say, which is finally focusing on problem solving or creating or innovating, given this wicked problem that's before us. And that that we're going to get there. But what we've done is we've tilled the soil, we've planted the seeds, we've fertilized, we've watered, there's been a little sunshine, you know, there's some sprigs of smart trust popping up, and we might have a chance to now have a difficult conversation about the actual both goals and process for whatever we're trying to achieve, about which we seriously disagree. Okay. And I can promise you that when you just go to talking about whatever it is you seriously disagree and expect that we're all going to be okay and nobody's going to take anything personally, good luck with that. So um, in the area of results, there's two things I want to say about results, and then I'll be done. One is that these days, this Cynefin framework for complexity that has 4 different categories for challenges that we're facing, I found this to be incredibly useful. It's CYNEFIN framework by Dave Snowden. Um, and again, it's 4 boxes. The bottom left is where the thing we're facing is relatively simple. The solution is known. We may have to find out what it is. We may have to do a little bit of work to, to solve it. Let's call that, that's the 50-piece puzzle. It's work, but it's a known quantity. We know what the picture is, to Tom's point, and we know, and we're going to try, by trial and error to put it together. Top left is complicated. Complicated means it can be figured out, but it's going to take some work. So that's the 500-piece puzzle. It's going to take some time. And it does help to know what the picture is, so that then we can make all the puzzle pieces fit together and we can work together to figure that out. It's complicated, but it's not like it's unsolvable. It's just that, it's going to take a little while, research, getting information, bringing it back, applying criteria to it. It can be solved. Top right here of the boxes would be complex. And complex is what they say in theory these days, things that have no technical solution, and they're going to require an adaptable solution in order to figure out how to move forward. In other words, we're going to have to invent it. We're going to have to figure it out and try it out and see what happens and pay attention and learn from the results and learn from the process and see if they're getting us closer to achieving whatever it is we're trying to achieve, whether it's overcome some problem or take advantage of some opportunity or create one. Um, Complex is a whole different area of endeavor. That would be like we have to create the puzzle. The puzzle doesn't, and no, I take it back. We have to create something. Well, maybe we have to create the puzzle, or maybe we have to create something else. Maybe it's not a puzzle, and we have to create something else here. Maybe it's a multi-dimensional puzzle, but it's a wicked thing. And there are a lot of things that fit that, whether it is, potentially things like climate change. Elections are that. Every election is a new thing. It's new, it's different people voting. The issues are different. It's different people running for office. It's a different age. There are no two elections that are exactly the same. Every election is a complex challenge. You don't have to make up, the form for it, but you do have to make up exactly how you're going to do it. And then last, the bottom right is what Dave Snowden called chaos. And chaos is where you got all those things going on, but you've also got major change happening. So it's not static to the point of where Shikant was talking about this morning earlier, that it's changing. So it's not even something you have to invent that's at least static, and the pieces are not moving. Chaos would be, the picture keeps changing of the puzzle, and that is that's a wicked problem. So simple or known, complicated but can be figured out, complex where it's going to have to be adapted or invented, and chaos where not only are some of those things going on, but the environment is changing and maybe the nature of the problem itself is changing. Maybe we need to invent a new game every 5 minutes. That's the chaos to it. Okay, so I want to offer a very simple, usable framework for then how we talk about the issues. First of all, we need to really just look, just observe. As Yogi Berra said, you can observe a lot just by watching. You really just need to look at it, just stare at it for a little while, and see if you can find out the extent to which, this might be a threat, it might be an opportunity, whatever it might be, and have some exercise as best you can, some level of creative and critical thinking, some level of imagining what to you would be the most positive, the most beneficial, the best outcome. And that is one of the reasons why I think that, that Einstein had that famous line about how imagination was more important than knowledge, that the ability to imagine a possible positive, or at least most positive you can think of, outcome is a really, really important skill, and one that all of us need to develop. We need to get over our negative bias about things, that things are just wrong. We need to get over that there's really no solution, and force ourselves to imagine at least the best possible outcomes. Second, to the extent that we can actually develop a little bit of an emotional connection to that best possible outcome, and a little bit inspire ourselves, that's really helpful in terms of our own energy, what we wish for, what we hope for, a little bit, as President Obama's book was titled, The Audacity of Hope, cultivate the ability to be hopeful. Because if we can imagine something and we can get a little bit inspired about it, that helps us to mobilize others, to attract others, to be able to work with us together on it. Some of those people might be stakeholders. Some of them just might be collaborators and thinking about it. But we're going to need to mobilize others and form then a concept regarding what it is that we think we're trying to achieve and some imagination of how we might get there, and then to engage broader stakeholders, especially people kind of throughout the ecosystem on whom we're interdependent, sources of funding, sources of expertise, people who might benefit from whatever it is we're trying to do. They say that whatever you start out to do for anyone, even with the best of intentions, if you try to do it without their input and without their feedback, you'll likely end up doing it to them. So this ethic and value and principle of getting people's input and feedback as you start off on any endeavor is really essential. And then, of course, you're going to design some kind of a prototype and get some feedback on that, improve it, experiment with it, test it, see what you can learn, and see how you can iterate. Either discard or improve or try other things. Those basic, very fundamental steps of imagining, getting, inspiring, mobilizing, conceptualizing, relating to all the different stakeholders, designing prototypes, getting feedback to improve them, experimenting, learning, and iterating, learning as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, as the agile motive, the agile process articulates. All of those are incredibly important, and they help us to be and stay resilient when everything just goes crazy. But in closing, I would say that that it's a useful thing to to remember as we're interacting with each other, to stay on topic, to be brief, to feel free to disagree, but do so courteously, and to the extent that you can talk yourself into keeping an open mind and staying curious so that you ask questions and not just express your opinions. You might learn something from some folks who might know something that you don't know, and that might help you on your journey.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So folks, it's time for questions. I'm going to start by asking the first question. Jeff, could you recap the model of stages of community building that Spec talked about and put your additional fifth step in there?
Yeah, I forgot to give you 4 and 5. Thank you, Shrikant. So 4 is, 3 is if you find a way to get through this thing where you have figured out, first of all, to Tom's point, what it is that you think you're trying to achieve, and not only in terms of what you think the result is, but what you're trying to get from that result, what experience you want to gain, whatever it is you want to gain as a result of that tangible thing that you think you want. And then you're able to figure out a way of getting it that is, mutually beneficial and adequately acceptable and satisfactory to both, and do it in a way that respects each other and builds smart trust. Then you're able to move from emptiness to what M. Scott Peck called community. That's the definition of community. You've been able to successfully disagree and move forward together. I think the 5th stage, which is actually, I think it's actually the hardest, is can you do it again? The 5th stage is repeating. Because if you can repeat that process, you will build a culture in an organization and in a relationship that will sustain you, and with regard to your strategies and your systems. And as the famous management guru Peter Drucker used to say, culture eats strategies for breakfast. And the more you can build a culture where this kind of behavior is expected, there are a lot of things you can achieve that are otherwise impossible to achieve.
Thank you, Jeff. Folks, so again, 4 rules. Type exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom to ask questions. Number 2, keep on topic. Number 3, be brief. And number 4, be courteous. Speak your mind, disagree, and be courteous. Next up is Joe, followed by Jyoti.
I have a quick question about the idea when you're asking people questions to explain more. Because the idea is sometimes is I worked in a very siloed organization. And sometimes the approach of asking people questions, they get very defensive when they can't answer them like immediately. So I also find this to be true also outside of in normal life, because if you don't have a lot of frames of reference, for which we're all limited, right, with our frames of reference, people will get offended like once you get outside of their comfort zone. So how do you engage that aspect of it where you don't start an argument by exposing, you know, somebody's inability to maybe explain what the other person or how their function fits into a larger picture?
So the way I might frame that, Joe, is so that the other person doesn't feel like you're interrogating them in some way, right? They feel respected by the fact that you're asking them this question rather than sort of confronting them or challenging them, right?
So it's the importance of framing. It really comes down to the importance of framing the question properly. Okay.
Well, I think it comes down to what you might do right before you ask that question, which takes me back to appreciating and figuring out some way to show respect and figuring out some way to show that you care about it. So that, and that was one of the interesting things about this survey of leaders, that not only I thought it was an interesting combination, that not only did they feel a very limited ability to have a difficult conversation, they were not good at asking, I wonder if. And so that, which is really sort of an appreciative inquiry question. And so the extent to which we're able to ask, can you tell me more about that, in a way that conveys appreciation, it can lead to less feeling of interrogation and starting an argument.
Thanks,
But
Jeff.
sometimes it's really essential.
Thank you.
Next up is Jyoti.
Yeah. Jeff, thank you for your presentation. You said everything right and everything good. A lot of things are doable. They are doable indeed, but you have to put your heart in it. My question to you is, when I work, I'm a retired professional now. I had to wear several different hats, shift the gears completely from one end to the other. One of my responsibilities was to be the messenger of the bad news. I had to deliver to the faculty the changing laws, which they were not happy about. And I had told them right from the get-go, my responsibility is to just deliver the law to you, not to make you do it. Although it was, my responsibility was also to make sure that I delivered the law in such a way that they do it. But I knew I was meeting an antagonistic group. They were not just going to do it. I knew that. So for me to start with saying, you have to do it, was pointless, because then they were going to throw stones at me. So I had to back off, and I had to just say, this is how the law wants you to do, the state wants you to do. And if you don't do this the right way, everybody can be cited by the law, by the state, and I will have to back off. I have done my job. What do you think about that?
Well, you were finding a way to couch it, in a way that it was, putting a little bit of sugar on that medicine to sweeten it a little, as we do for children, and maybe sometimes for ourselves, and that's, that's really important. Among the things to be conscious of, I mean, it's, in history, they used to kill the messenger of bad news, so that that the idea of, don't shoot the messenger is like, there's a reason for that phrase. And Jyoti, what's even tougher is if you're the person in authority and you're going to have to actually make that decision. Like the decision's not going to, on the ladder of decision making between, an authority or unanimous or consensus or majority vote. In this case, for whatever reason, one person's going to need to make that decision. And obviously one of the major qualities of a good leader is that they're able to say no to their friends, and that they're going to need to deliver bad news, disappointing news sometimes. The ability to do that skillfully and in a compassionate and appreciative way is a really, really important skill. And so it just goes back, to those steps of conversational intelligence. And I just can't tell you the number of times in my lifetime, and I'm sure you have as well, where you go straight to the content, thinking, oh, we're all adults here. Well, we are and we're not. And so, adding that perspective and framing it can just be, life or death of the group going forward.
Excellent. So what are the questions do you want us to discuss in the breakout rooms, Jeff?
Shrikant, could you read them there? I don't have them in front of me.
Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and read them. The first question is, what is something that you can, firstly, just to give you a background. So we always do these breakout rooms. So this is where we are able to actually chew the ideas and apply the ideas ourselves. So the breakout rooms will last for about 20 minutes. And after the breakout rooms will come back into this main room to share our takeaways. So the first question is, what is something that can make productive disagreement in a relationship or group difficult to generate, maintain, or recover? And what might be ways of overcoming it? So that's the first one. The second question is, who is someone you personally experienced as being skillful in sustaining productive disagreement? What is something they consistently did that contributed to their effectiveness? Okay, that's the second question. The third question, what is something you want to remember and share with others or apply from this presentation or discussions? So those are the three questions, folks. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and post this. I'm going to send these questions to you. So the first one is, what makes a productive disagreement difficult and how can you overcome it? Number two is, what are some of the examples that you have personally experienced of somebody being skillful, and what do they do to make that happen? And third one, what are you taking away from this presentation? All right, so that's what we are going to do. Any further comments before we go to the discussion, to the breakout rooms, Jeff?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm starting the breakout rooms now, and we'll be back here in 20 minutes to share our takeaways, starting the breakout rooms now. All right, welcome back, everybody. Excellent. So it's now time for takeaways. So I'm going to call people in the order in which I see them. If you want to skip, you can go ahead and type skip. So just going to call in the order in which I see people on the screen. So let's start with, let's see, Francoise, Ping, and Jyoti. Francoise?
I really enjoyed the presentation, and but I still think some of the points are far much stronger than others. Some I would kind of have some little arguments about it, which I would enjoy in a nice way. And as I mentioned in our room, I think the background, the cultural background of people is very important, because some of those things may work more or less in a great way, depending where people are coming from.
Thank you, Francoise. Next up is Ping, Jyoti, and Dave. Ping?
Okay, I want to follow up with the Francois saying, by the way, we have such a privilege to have the speaker in our mini group, so I feel so wonderful. I want to say that in my culture, I mean, actually, in the culture outside of the United States, I feel it's more speaker-oriented conversation, and I mean, I have a tendency to understand whatever the speaker is saying from the speaker's point of view. And if there's anything that is different than my opinion or whatever, I edit it out and I understand that it's not, the speaker did not have the intention to make anyone angry or whatever. But in this culture, it seems like it's a very listener oriented. And if they are unhappy with whatever they heard, then they blame on the speaker. You did not say, not all Americans are like this way. Not all people are like that way. I just feel like it's you need to understand that, of course, everybody's point of view is limited by their own experience. So it's like this listener oriented versus speaker oriented. So in America, I feel like if I want to say something, I have to be so considerate of everyone, please everyone, and add a bunch of addendum so that people don't feel offended or make the speech more politically correct. And I didn't have such a restriction outside of America. I traveled Europe and Asia and South America. Never people are like this.
Thank you, Ping. Next up is Jyoti, Dave, and Sharon.
I think I agreed with Jeff for almost everything. I agreed with him, and I almost did those things all my life because I was a school psychologist, and my job was to go in the field, be an administrator, and help people understand what they were not doing right and what have you. So, like Ping, I don't know whether I did it because I was trying to prove to myself that I'm in a different culture and I got to be on board with everything or what have you. It did come with difficulty because I do agree with Ping. People in the USA are very vocal, very aggressive, and very assertive. And they want to shift the blame on others that they don't want to do their work, basically. They want to say that, you do it for me. If you think you can do it, then you do it for me. But my question to Jeff was, I resolved all those things amicably. I was fine with that. And when I would go home, and I was not a happy soul. And that's what I was talking to you in the breakout room, that about a person last night. I know she's fake, and I know it, and I resolved it. It was a good strategy I used. Everything was fine. I did not come home feeling happy. You understand what I'm saying? Like I was telling you, like I was, and that's what I did all my life. Well, I went home and I talked to my husband, talked to my kids, da 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 da. And at some point, I had to learn, but that's the way it is. And same thing is now arising now. I'm retired, I'm at peace and what have you, but one person has come in my life who's fake, and how do I have peace within myself? That's what I want you to tell me.
Thank you, Jyoti. What we'll do is that at the end of it, Jeff will have the opportunity of responding or commenting on any of the comments, okay?
Okay.
Next up, Dave, Sharon, and Joe. Dave?
Jeff, great presentation. Tell me more.
Good one, Dave. Next up is Sharon, Joe, and Mary.
Yeah, I thought that this was an excellent presentation. There's so much to consider. I'm going to take away, I really loved your opening story, and I think I'm going to use that on myself. So thank you.
Wonderful. Next up is Joe, Jean, and Judith. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, again, that was an excellent presentation. I don't think I've ever had that many notes from one particular presentation and that many takeaways. But really what we talked about in our group is the importance of outcomes and trying to get to an agreement on that. And then even if you don't initially agree on outcomes, then how do you get to a point where you kind of understand each other and then maybe can have a productive conversation? So part of that is just respect and just being, listening, and not bringing our past into the present is another thing that really came into as part of our conversations as well. the idea also that there's a quite a bit to work on personally as well in this area. But one of the key components, again, is respect, that I really will, focus on more than anything else, because I think that that's really key to building up a certain level of trust, which is paramount to any relationship. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Next up is Jean, Judith, and Paul. Jean?
Yeah, great presentation. This is really helpful. I think the important is first, we assume everybody is right to their own view. So we can be patient listening to them because we all see the world from different perspectives. Instead of assuming they're wrong, I think that's the starting point. Once we change the attitude, all the other things can change easily. Another thing I learned is it's very important to involve the people we try to help them. I found a lot of times people have bad intention doing the wrong policy because they didn't involve the people, the stakeholders. So that's good, like the homeless shelter. They have all the community members never invite the homeless shelter people to involve, which is a mistake. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. Great points. Next up is Judith, Paul, and Priya. Judith?
Yeah, so our group talked about culture, different cultures having different approaches. And then someone mentioned also that, in a work environment, there may be some people that are quieter. So then I guess culture is introversion and extroversion too, not just from another country per se, and then our own personal history. So I think I love the story about the mountain, because I think that instead of thinking people are trying to manipulate you when they use some strategies, it's really just coming from a place of sincere compassion to think, what is this other person's point of view? Where are they coming from? And taking in all of that first, in the same way you'd want to understand someone to understand you. And then with that as a starting point, you can build on, that's where the listening comes. I mean, I don't think that Americans have a culture, but the idea of listening isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing. The idea of listening with compassion and true authenticity to understand someone else is what, no matter what your culture is or your introversion, extroversion type is what's important to start a dialogue and then work together to find a resolution.
Thank you, Judith. Next up is Paul, Priya, and Donna. Paul, go ahead.
Okay. I would start like this. About 4 years ago, I did that Big Five Jordan Peterson test about for the psychology traits. Agreeableness, exceptionally low. So basically, I really listened carefully what Jeff was saying, and I really like Jeff, but I cannot agree almost with anything what he said. Jeff, if you would ever ask me to get you a job in my corporation, sorry, won't happen. So I would be afraid that you would be, that everybody who is working for me would be very nice. They will be gladly talking to you, but they won't do any work. That's what I would be afraid. Anyway, if I don't go to discussions if I don't know that I am right. Otherwise, I listen. I always listen. And when I go to discussion, I have to know ahead that I am right on everything what I say. I don't bullshit around. I say what I say, and I am right on that. That's it. That's how you have to do it in private business. End of the story. So your points are very well taken, but they cannot do anything in a small private business.
Okay, Paul, I appreciate your disagreement. You did disagree with people, and you did that courteously, so I appreciate that. Next up is Priya, Donna, and Marco. Priya, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. This was always, these meetings are always great, and I like the presentation. I don't typically join on Saturday, but I saw the title and I said I have to come in and hear this. And as I think Dave had said, I definitely want to know more. There's more things that based on what you said, it was a two-part, big, full, I guess, class or session. And so this is an abbreviated version. So I thought I would definitely join whatever it is that has the full class. The takeaway from me was like, first, I believe it was Gang who mentioned that assuming that our first failure, or like us, our own bias, is assuming that what we're thinking and our views are right. And so that made me think about how, like, also connecting it back to the curiosity of how, like, if we go in with the argument or disagreement, that it's okay for us to change, because our views might be coming from an experience that might be just doesn't have all the information, doesn't have everything, that whatever limited knowledge we had, and going in there and understand, trying to truly listen and hear and be open to changing your view if what you had, if that's the outcome that you're looking to achieve, is one that I know it's hard to do. And especially for me, learning to really listen and be patient to ask questions is something that requires practice, and I'm hoping to achieve from, as always, that I'm gaining from these sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Next up is Donna, Marco, and Susan. Donna?
So I love the presentation. Like Joe, I took a lot of notes. My top 3 takeaways: be skeptical of our opinions. Also be skeptical of others' opinions, which I think sometimes when you're in a disagreement, you already are skeptical. Listen to things we are saying to ourselves. I love that one because it makes us probe deep to see what our potential biases are, or our emotional underlying content is. The third top, and these are just my top 3, you need to get people to think that you are really on their side, what they are feeling and thinking, and why they are thinking it. The other thing, like others have said, wanting more, this was awesome. So maybe even more like references in the various books and the methods and things like that. This was great. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Donna. I really like that, the 3 takeaways typed up. I think this is amazing. This is the kind of listener that any speaker would want. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Next up is Marco, Susan, and Taimi. Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, and it was an excellent presentation. And my biggest takeaway was basically the goal of a disagreement, that you're getting to the we. So that was very that was very helpful for me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Marco. Next up is Susan, Taimi, and Jairo. Susan, go ahead. Okay, next up is Jairo. Jairo, go ahead.
Yes, the reason why this attracted me was because in Facebook, I got a message from a friend asking me if I were a supporter of the other camp politically, because he's right now in the process of unfriending 30 of his friends, and I posted back to him in Messenger saying, isn't that kind of ridiculous, unfriending? And he said that I've had enough with them, and things like that. So I was wondering, what would the strategy be to be able to engage in those people and maybe have conversations? Well, it'd be in post in Facebook, but I got some ideas for that.
Thank you, Hiro. Next up is Julie and Kevin. Julie, go ahead.
Okay. In the past, I've typically taken that bait from bully bosses, my mother, all kinds of people, and then I've gotten defensive. And it was just never a good outcome. I never felt heard. I never was heard. So as a result, I avoid conflict at all costs. And if I sense one, I get triggered and that bait comes along, and I've had to learn how to not fight it. And how do I do that? I remember a couple of things have been helpful, and some things from this meetup have been helpful. One thing, I try to keep my power by remembering that it's not personal. It's saying some more about them than it's saying anything about me. And to remember I have a choice whether to see their innocence or their guilt. That keeps my power. And this one I've been getting this week is to be curious. And that tendency to have me fall into fear, if I could just ride the band of curiosity, I keep my power. And even if they are insane and just toxic, maybe they are right. And so that curiosity band would, maybe I could learn something. So I like it. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Julie. Next up is Kevin, followed by Mike. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, my takeaway is Jeff showed lots of techniques how to change me to the way upside down. That's I learned. I think we should be open-minded and unbiased way to pursue the trust.
Wonderful. I think, Mike, you came in late, so I'm going to skip you.
I didn't.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I learned we should appreciate and respect others first. Then, last, like David and Priya said, I would learn more from Jeff. I wonder if you can organize another session from Jeff. Thank you.
Okay, we'll definitely look at that. Talk to Jeff about it. All right. So Jeff, now it's your turn to respond, comment, or anything on any of the takeaways. Or you can start by talking about your takeaway from this whole process.
Well, thank you all for joining in. It's always a wonderful thing to get to see what sticks. What seems to be useful. It's almost kind of like doing a survey and finding out, okay, so, what did people really gain from it? I want to respond to a couple things that were said that just, I think, were really terrific. So first of all, what Francoise and others said about culture, I totally agree with that there are just major differences between cultures in terms of how to, for example, show appreciation, or how to show respect, or how to argue. There are just major differences. And I've had that experience myself in my own work in Russia and in South America and various places. And so, and interestingly enough, that's also true, for example, between the culture of work, or the culture of family, or the culture of friends, or the culture of a sports team, or the culture of a religious association you're part of. They all have their own cultures. And to become multicultural is really, I think, one of the keys to success in life, whether you try and help to shift the culture, or whether you help to, or whether you just want to join in, and be a part of it and fit and work and play there. But there was one couple things that I brought up in the breakout that I did not say, that I wanted to just add here. This has to do with reactions and responses, and it is related to some of the things you said. So there are basically 4 emotional reactions when we feel conflict, either coming at us or happening. And those most common emotional reactions are fight, flight, freeze, or appease. That we tend to either, we want to win, we fight back, we get out of there, we avoid, we freeze, like sort of deer in the headlights. We've got phrases for almost every one of these things in the language, where, just don't know what to do. I'm just sort of caught, hope it'll just go away or end, or the spotlight will go away from me. Or last, just give in, just get over it. It's not that important. Have it your way, whatever you want, fine, and move on. And so, but those are all emotional reactions, and they're quite understandable. They're almost unavoidable. There's a power in being able to pause, the power of pause for a second. And like I said, it's one of the reasons that I have found it useful to say to people, can you tell me more about that? Because it gives me the chance to pause. There's only 5 responses to strenuous conflict, and they are avoid, accommodate, compromise, compete, or collaborate. So that, the idea that, you might just, don't play, don't go there with me, accommodate, have it your way. It's okay. It's not that important to me. Fine. Compromise. Let's be fair. Let's work this out. Let's be fair with each other, and expecting every situation to do that. Compete. Conflict comes up. I'm jumping in. I'm going to win. I'm a winner. I win. That's what's going to happen. Or collaborate. We all just, cool off for a minute. And if we've got a little bit of time, put our ideas on the shelf and see if we can come up with something together that's better than what any of us could come up with alone. We might even question even what it is that we're trying to achieve and shift that, because it seems like that's the best way around it. And look for adequately sort of win-win outcomes. The interesting thing about that is, which one of those is right to do all of the time? None of them. Everyone is right to do some of the time. And so maturity comes from being able not only to apply some criteria here to choosing which one to do, but also being skillful at doing all 5, so that you can, in the right situation, you can do what's called for. And when the situation shifts 3 minutes later and you see the whole scene is different, you can do that one instead. So anyone who says that they always do one and that works for them, well, they're sort of stuck. That's the hammer and nail. A hammer's all you got, so every problem's got to look like a nail. And it's not a 21st century leadership or management successful tool. So that's what I'll offer to you in the end. And I really wish that that Paul was here, because I would love to have a productive disagreement with Paul.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jeff. This was a great session. And looks like everybody got a lot out of it. And what we'll do is that, we're going to have a lot of productive disagreements during our meetups. So we'll see how well people keep applying your ideas. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. See you next time. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rika.